We are transmitting live from the void. My name is Christopher Gullidge. I am the creator and author of Dear Future Overlords. I am joined by my brilliant co-host, Dr. Morton, author of The Seeker Scoop. And we are joined today with our special guest, Nick Middaugh. I am super excited about having Nick on the show today. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you agreeing to be on the show today. That's super awesome of you. So before we get started, we're going to take a look at some of Nick's work, and then on the other side we'll have some questions. Welcome, Joel L, who's just joined us. Schminky, I don't know if I said that right. Frankie Dyson, the one and only Frankie Dyson, is here. And Jason, my loyal husband, always joins on these shows. Thank you so much for joining us as always. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please join us in the comments. We love to hear your participation. This is not just us talking. All right, so let's take a look at some of Nick's work. All right, so you can find Nick at substack.com at Nick Middaugh. Nick writes, character is destiny, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then welcome to the fall, the fiction muscle that he says he likes to occasionally flex. So that's super exciting. Nick's character is destiny channel is over at nickmiddaugh.substack.com. I have been a fan of Nick's for quite some time. Read a lot of his pieces. They are all just fantastic and emotional and raw and vulnerable. And I think that is a super rare thing. We're gonna pop on over to let's move over to the piece that we're going to go over today is the 007, The Myth of an Easy Life, building on Nietzsche's Self-Overcoming the Drowning Man. This was published March the 6th. Fantastic piece. Highly recommend reading the whole thing. Gonna pop over to ignore my Windows screen there. We're gonna pop down to well, I can't navigate, apparently. Ta-da! There we go. So this is the part we're going to read, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So Nick starts with, the boy I was, caged in memory's recesses, often avoided, is rarely recalled kindly. I don't see him from his perspective. When sharing my post-violation childhood, I fail to slip others into the 5-year-old Nick's shoes. As a 30-year-old, I can't. My voice too deep, my shoes too large. Literally and metaphorically, rather, I struggle to fit back in myself. I get a much more visceral experience of those emotions I felt as a child when I am placed there unexpectedly, rather than knowingly and willingly. On occasion, something reduces me in such a capacity that I can feel almost exactly how I felt as a boy: condemned, broken, fearful, emotionally unstable, confused, lacking confidence, melancholic, crying often, tired often, and weary of others. I do not blame anyone nor anything for being here, rather than steam on by and package those feelings back down to the depths. I have decided to drop the anchor, don the salvage swimming equipment, and leap from the bow. As much as I will speak to the utility and tribe, I seem to default to a period of suffering in silence before I am willing to ask for help. Untied to the usual external fatigues of ego, it is due to the internal sort. The majority of the work I have done to improve my character has been done absent external scrutiny, approval, or appearance at all. Such external consequences are ever present, and yet they pale in comparison to the realized internals. And so in some respects, I see such low points as my problem, and mine alone. A simple return to exploring the depths from which it shrieked to remove the tether myself. This is not to suggest therapy supports or other friendly vessels ought be bypassed or ignored. I am simply at a different place in my voyage. Trouble is, the sorting of such things, in my view, requires a degree of isolation. I am woefully unable to adequately conceal them when something is troubling me. And so, removing myself or limiting exposure to others provides some utility in getting to the bottom of it. Yet these periods of isolation often exceed what is likely healthy. And so there is a dichotomy here, and I cannot simply claim freedom from its more negative aspects. Grief and loneliness have surfaced as the clearest signals from the boy I once was. So, first of all, Holy Hannah. Second of all, I just want to start with what does that little segment mean to you? What do you kind of hope was coming out of that?
I think to me, I was trying to capture how complex it is to try to fold yourself back into that place. To try to take on, because as much of us with violation in common or childhood trauma in common, or really even just trauma in common, at least particularly in regard to childhood, you lack so much context to the world around you. And it's almost like I remember how I felt. I can kind of vaguely recall a lot of those emotions, but unless I'm, placed there kind of unwillingly, they lack a certain level of ferocity. Like, they're not as visceral. It's harder to put myself back there because so much of what I do is, like, I go and I advocate for men under similar circumstances. I talk about the issue that's violation. For those of you that don't know what I'm referring to, it's child sexual abuse, specifically for men. And so and actually, when I had wrote that, I'd actually been fresh off of a video called Removed. It's on YouTube. It actually deals with like the foster care system, and that's what I do for my day job, for those that aren't aware. But it put me back in that place in a much more clear way than I had really been in quite a while. And it was that shared isolation, that shared silence, that struggle, because like I had a very good upbringing external to those circumstances. Like, considering those circumstances, I got a lot of what foster kids don't get. I got a lot of what a lot of children don't get. Like, I had a stable set of parents, everything I needed, not necessarily everything I wanted. And I just kind of followed that line through writing that, like that through line, trying to return to those depths and sort things out. And yeah, it's not something that I always feel like I can ask for help for. It's not always something that I feel like I can bring to other people. It's almost, when I'm talking about, hey, I know that this isolation probably isn't good. And, and there's a degree of, how much of this should I take on by myself before I reach out to a professional or a friend or a family member or whatever. It almost feels necessary to me.
Do you feel like perhaps that comes from a sense of like your experience is so unique to yourself that like perhaps there's like a level that other people just won't understand you, and you have to sort of bridge that translation so that people can understand where you're coming from? Like, that seems like something that would be a solo endeavor.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah, because as common as it is, I mean, like, I go on to write a little bit like this notion of like uniquely universal. We're all human. We're all going through this existence called life, and we all have a lot of similarities, but we're all going through it by ourselves in essence. And the way that you feel about something and the way that I feel about something post any kind of event could vary wildly, right along with our perspective. So, to that end and related to that issue, it's sometimes, yeah, I mean, most people, and this isn't to suggest that they can't understand, it's just it's hard to find someone who can relate to you without them going through it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
No, I think it does.
Yeah.
Do you? So I mean, there's a lot of just like opening up and raw vulnerability in all of your pieces. They all have that in common. And so I have to I wonder, do you feel like sometimes like this is your outlet for that? Do you ever feel like that this is kind of more effective in talking about it than talking to people live and in person?
I think so. Yeah, I do find a lot of utility in getting it out here. It's kind of a weird form of therapy, I guess, to kind of, here you go, here's what I'm thinking today, or you know what I mean. But at the same time, no, it is very, yeah, it's an outlet. It's therapeutic. And of course, the flip side of that is that I know that I'm not unique in it, and there is the self-serving aspect of it. Yeah, absolutely. It feels like an outlet, and absolutely, I think it helps me tremendously to be able to write and to talk about it. But you also have the goal of, hey, maybe somebody else will find that too here.
What's the most interesting thing you found like in your Substack journey, aside from just the cathartic nature of the writing itself?
Some of the community, for sure. To be honest with you, I spent so much time writing with nobody really. I don't, just not much engagement or people being like, hey, I really like this. And then, it started over the last, like after I launched Character's Destiny is when I really started getting feedback from people. So a lot of the feedback that I've gotten has been pretty interesting. It's always a surprise and a little bit surreal when somebody says, hey, I really like this piece you wrote. And I'm like, really? That's great. Like, I'm glad you got something from it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, because to me, like, I'm just writing and like I'd like it to, I'd like to have it presentable and to some measure, professional, but I wasn't getting feedback for the longest time, so I'm like, I don't even know if I'm good at this or not, but you know what I mean. So
I think that is that's kind of like the point of Transmissions of the Void, right? Where we all kind of feel like we have that in common sometimes. Speaking of community, let's say hi to Leorala. I never know if I'm saying your name correctly. But thanks for joining. Brandon also joined. Frankie Dyson has said it's the healing the silence, and Substack is great for that.
Yep.
So I know that the next thing that we wanted to talk about was your name for this channel. Character is Destiny. Tell us a little bit about where that came from and kind of what that means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I should also take a moment. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate your kind words. Everything.
We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
We're happy to share it. So,
of course. Well, thank you. So it kind of, I was looking for, because, prior to launching Character's Destiny, I had kind of just gone by like a different name. It was Diary of a Male Survivor. and it was more focused on that avenue of everything that I got going on. And I wanted to expand into like philosophy, moral, like morality. Um, Apparently, this thing called the philosophy of suffering, and some other things, and talk about more stuff than just that. Um, so I'm like reading a bunch of different philosophy, mostly listening to it, and I stumble on this guy, Heraclitus, and he's this pre-Socratic uh, philosopher, and I see a quote from him, "Character's destiny," and I'm like, "That's interesting," because it's such a like so much of my story has been a display of moral injury. What are you engaging with when you're an alcoholic? What are you engaging with post trauma, mental illness, all these other things? Like, what's actually under attack? Well, it's really your character. We can throw around the slogans of mindset, discipline, resilience, get after it, whatever. But what lies beneath is your character. These are just extensions of it. These are devices of it, right? So the notion that the very character that you are forming through, if you look at like Aristotle's habit loop, negative habits or negative acts that turn into negative habits, positive ones that turn into good habits, and everything like that, you're actually forging your character. So the notion that who you are every day, your character, your moral compass, where does it point, is going to determine where you're at. I found that to be kind of profound in a way, because it's like 3 words. This dude says it, and it's like, wow, that's actually pretty deep. And how fitting is that for our society and our culture these days? I mean, it's totally relevant, where our character is constantly under attack these days. And for me, so much of my work in recovery or the work that I do in mental health is a test of character. And
I think,
character is the battleground I'm on. So that's what I want to write about, Sorry.
and no, I was interrupting you. So I think character is like a good word too, because it sort of implies that you're building something, like as a writer, you write a character, and so like that's an aspect of identity that I find really interesting, is how you craft that identity. And then character is destiny. It's just saying like, so much of like what's determined for us comes from how we craft our own identity and how we respond to the world. And you really do have a lot of control over them. I think that's what your writing often shows. And especially because you touch on like heavier stuff like mental health and things like that, where a lot of people, like they won't take the risk that you'll take in saying like, hey, this isn't, we're not all we don't have to be victims of our circumstances. It's tough for the people who are, and like I want to support them, but like there is a path to move forward. And so I like that you're showing that. I think
Absolutely.
I think it's important.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've caught, like, I have some relationships with different organizations that are issue facing, with whether it's Sapria or 1 in 6 and some of these other groups. And there's so many advocates, and I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but a lot of them identify with that moniker, survivor. And, I wrote about, I think it was 005 violation, and a little bit in Misfortunes or Gifts. And it's this idea of like, I invoke Viktor Frankl, and I'm like pulling from these philosophers and these mental health greats that we've had. And I want to earn new labels. I don't want to be tethered to this victim or survivor thing. And it's not comfortable, because like I was, in some respect, like, yes, technically I was a victim. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't choose for the things that happened to me in my childhood. But I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 30, and I recognize fully what it is like to be entirely captured, overshadowed by it, and feeling powerless and everything else. And it's a wretched place to be. So it's not, I think you touch on a really important point that I do try to make is like, you can get through this. You are so much more than your circumstances. It's not going to be pretty. It's not always great, but like you are more and you can get through this. I am in this river with you. I'm not above it, below it, right here in the middle with you. We're going to get to the other side. We're going to figure it out. But yeah, if I can nudge people towards that overcoming, that's the goal. So
that is awesome, and I think that's a perfect segue to the next topic.
Brandon, see what's up.
Which is this concept of agency. First, though, I do want to go over to our audience here. We want to say hi to the Warden's Archive. Thanks so much for joining. Brandon says that he wanted Nick to know that I'm here. I'm his cousin. I'm in the Navy and been gone the past 5 weeks out at sea, so I haven't been able to follow him the way I wanted to the past weeks. Welcome, Brandon. Thank you so much for that comment. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing out at sea. That's not easy. And for taking the time to join us today and say hi to Nick. Nick, anything you want to say to Brandon?
Yeah, I love you, dude. Be safe. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about you a lot lately. Keep on trucking.
That is pretty awesome. Thanks. So there's a quote from your piece that I think probably encapsulates, first of all, the entire piece, but also it kind of moves into this concept of agency, which you use a lot in this piece. You also use a lot in your pieces in general. Like you were saying earlier, it's a concept you really try to drive home that yes, these things happened. Yes, it's hard to get over these things, but you have more control over your life than perhaps the world is telling you that you do. So this, the drowning man was never meant to leave the water, at least not permanently. So what's the emotion behind that? What's the concept? Where were you going?
Yeah, I think, some of it has to do with the recognition that when you are in pain and you are suffering, whether it's mental health strife or it's anything really, you're feeling that toll. It's hard to see the contours of the lake when you're swallowing it, right? It's hard when you're in the middle of the suffer. It's hard to recognize everything that's going on around you, whether that's the consequences of the actions you're taking, people passing you by, offering a hand, whatever it might be, and you desperately want to get out of that water, but like I said, you're not meant to permanently, right? Because what's going on, in the metaphor, what's going on underneath of you, what's beneath the surface, we have to figure all of that out before we can really get out of the water, right? So it's almost like a willing return to go and examine in a productive manner with the goal of addressing it, swimming down, cutting the tether, working on it, and recognizing that like you might get out of the water someday. You might climb on a ship, you might craft your own, but when things crop up, you got to get back down in there and get to work. You got to address.
I think that's probably one of my favorite parts about this piece in general is just the way that you're able to bring that imagery to life. Like that is just such a visceral image, right? Of the sea, the tethers, the tentacles, the whatever it is that you imagine is at the bottom of the sea, just kind of like grappling at your legs and continuing to pull you down. And it is up to you to make sure that you dive down and you do the hard work of cutting those things that are pulling you down. And I think that's just that is just a brilliant imagery, and it's something that plays through your mind. You can see it in your mind's eye as you're reading this piece, and it's such a visual anchor to the entire concept.
I appreciate it. That's what I was hoping for. So
I think another interesting thing, that quote, but the whole piece in general, there's sort of like an unnamed theme of accountability that sort of comes along with, going back into the water and re-examining whether it be abuse or any sort of trauma, and not examining it to relive in that situation, but to find like the strength, like what came out of that, like how did that change me, how did that improve me, like there's some, like we don't always have to just focus on the negative aspects of things, like a lot of times trauma creates a way of experiencing the world that actually builds a lot of strength qualities as well. And so I think that all starts with accountability, recognizing, like how do you hold elements of yourself responsible for things that were really out of your control, right?
Yeah.
Not only just events, but also how those events shaped your character and how that shaped, the life events that led to afterwards as well. So I think that's a very deep theme that runs through this that's not necessarily named, but I think accountability, you really touch on it in a good way.
Thank you. Yeah, I often say, like you can't change what you don't own. And there's certain things, like with specifically the thing that happened to me as a kid, I might not be able to own or take responsibility or assume full accountability over what happened to me because it happened to me, right? But I can still, to my ability, take accountability over my response. And I can take accountability over how I'm going to move forward. And I can take accountability over how I'm going to address those problems. And as uncomfortable as it might be, I'm going to grab that swimming gear that I put together and I'm going to go back down there and I'm going to figure it out because what's the alternative?
Yeah. You paint a beautiful metaphor. You sort of play with the metaphor throughout the piece. And I really encourage anybody to go check out the full piece because it's beautifully written and it's just a beautiful sort of, I don't know, for me, it kind of encapsulates your whole piece or your whole channel in a sense, right? Like it really
does.
The element of your character and like what crafted that character. So, and
absolutely, I have read this piece 4 times now, because there is just that much into it. Let's see. Ginger says, "What's the piece for those who came in later?" Ginger, thanks so much for joining. We are Dr. Morton just posted it there. We're talking to Nick Middaugh today. Nick's channel is Character is Destiny. So we're actually bouncing into this next piece quite nicely. This next quote that Dr. Morton and I wanted to talk about today. This quote is, "Thus Nietzsche's self-overcoming shines in this respect. The drowning man must absolutely explore his depths and find sufficient growth in collecting the scraps of other ships below and crafting them into his own vessel for sailing out of recognition of his self as sufficiently motivating." That was just crazy to me in the way that it just grabbed me emotionally and slammed me into the water. Tell me, what was going through your head whenever you wrote that?
If I were to boil it down, really, it falls back on a little bit of that accountability, but also it's, hey, I'm in the water. And the only way that I'm going to get out of the water is if I figure this out myself, truly. Because, like, I think there's much to be said on the topic of his idea of self-overcoming and everything. But therapy is great. External support is great. But you have to do the work. And at a certain point, which I think is particularly hard for a variety of people going through things, is just recognizing that. I mean, nobody's going to come and save you from yourself. Like, and recognizing the self-worth that, you have to discover the value in yourself, arriving to a place where you heal enough to you're like, no, you know what? Like, I don't need to do this for anybody but me. Like, I need to heal and I need to find that value, that motivation to better myself from myself, because I am worth it. And it's also tied into um, a little bit of motivation from my initial reason to stop drinking. Like, I was a rampant drunk, uh, coming up on 5 years sober, but I I had to recognize, like, I'm looking at all this wreckage around me, and I'm in the water and I'm drowning, and I got to recognize that I have to do this for me, because if I can't do it for me, then I can't do it for anybody else. You've heard like a parallel, almost like you can't love anybody until you love yourself. That's kind of like another way of that we like to kind of hint at this notion of self-worth. And that's truly, what was going through my mind is like, how can I like present this? And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where I was going with it. And that's kind of like what was going through my mind when I wrote it.
I just think it's such a powerful concept because, I mean, when I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, as someone who, when you love somebody, whenever you care about somebody, you want to reach out and you want to help them and you want to offer support and you want to give them a hand up and you want to do these things, but at the end of the day, there's no amount of support or rescue or help that's going to stick if the person themselves doesn't have that self-motivation. And I think that's just a huge realization.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I think there's a big difference, especially when it comes to, healing trauma. There's a big difference between understanding and like sort of accepting what you're told in a sense, because there is so much information out there and it's easy to sort of just like, oh, well, this person has these credentials, so I need to listen to them. But like, we're all ourselves, right? And so that actual true understanding comes from within. It comes from like understanding yourself, and no one can really teach you that. They can really only give you hints towards finding it yourself.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. We're the author of our own book.
Yes, which I think plays nicely on, your entire concept, not only through all of your pieces, but also through your title itself. The character is destiny. That is the entire thread that holds it all together. Is we are all the author of our own books, regardless of what the past, present, or future looks like, and that is both terrifying and also very freeing at the same time.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning about Nietzsche's self-overcoming, which is sort of the idea, for people who don't know, if I'm summarizing this correctly, you can let me know if I've misinterpreted this, but my understanding of the concept is that, like we always see what we want and we sort of strive for it, but then like as soon as we achieve it, we kind of feel, oh, like there's something better. Now I'm going to go chase the next thing, right? And my understanding of it is sort of focusing on growth and focusing on your like internal goals, because those are goals that like once you achieve them, they're always there. Like that information is in you, like that understanding is in you, and you're going to apply that to everything else. And I was reading up on the guy who you actually used your quote for your piece from, and he mentions that sort of, every time we step in the water, we're not stepping in the same place, even if we're stepping in the same place of the river, because the water is always flowing. And our lives, like we're water, so we're always flowing too. So like every time you go back into the depths, you're not experiencing the exact same experience. You're experiencing that experience with a new lens for reflection. And that's sort of like, that creates that feedback loop of growth. And then I was sort of wondering, like, for you, do you feel like this sort of idea of self-overcoming, do you feel like it solves that problem of sort of like chasing happiness, or do you feel like it's sort of an acceptance of it?
I have a with regard to happiness, I have like I don't think it's necessarily like an end state. I don't think it's this thing that is achievable, not from a negative perspective, right? Like, what is happiness? Like, I don't think it's this thing that is permanent. I don't think it's this end state that you can like, oh, I'm just like happy all the time and like everything's fine and I'm going to stay this way for years and years and years and years and never be sad. Or I think contentment, is what I strive for instead of happiness. So I think acceptance, yeah, and not just, it's accepting the circumstances. It's accepting that this is going to be however long we're on this dust ball, a continual process. Accepting the process, accepting the circumstances, and striving for that contentment. And I think that you actually weaved in a little bit more than I had considered when I was writing it. Was like, yeah, no, actually, the depths are changing, aren't they? Because everything is constant change. Like, that's his whole thing, is like, life is flux. Nothing's ever the same. Like, the water is different. You're wet. You've aged. You have a different thought. Like, the dirt might be different. Like, everything is different. Everything is constantly in this state of flux. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I don't feel like I added anything extra. Maybe I just saw it in there, but you were definitely the one who put it in there.
Yeah. Well,
do not understand yourself as an artist.
Yeah, perhaps. You've, yeah. I appreciate it either way. Thank you. Yeah.
So let's move into the last quote that we wanted to explore. So the last one was, perhaps today I simply lack the fortitude against the tug of the depths to suggest there is a cure. This stuck out with me particularly because it can be taken a few different ways. So I'm just curious what you were hoping to communicate through that, and kind of what are the emotional strings behind that?
Yeah, I think it's not every day is a good day, and as I continue to navigate this weird experience of doing what I do, my perspective is evolving, and I recognize that, or I mean, in some case, maybe it's devolving. Either way, I recognize that I'm not going to carry the same perspective, say, even 2-3 years from now. Hopefully, in its undercurrent, there has been growth and enrichment, but I think it's important to highlight that some days this shit feels overpowering, and I question. I'm like, man, do I have it in me to keep going in this direction? It's so easy to devolve. It's so easy to want to escape. It's so easy to hide from it, to run from it, to not want to face it, and to not want to get back. Like, we're going to jump off the bow now and get back in there and sort this shit out. And like, I'd rather just watch TV and like just force it back down and like not really deal with my problems right now, or maybe go do something else. And yeah.
That's actually reminds me of something I've been thinking about just a lot, about emotions in general. And your pieces obviously talk about emotion a lot, and that sort of interplay between our identity and our emotions. And it's really a feedback loop, because our emotions shape our identity, and then our identity, reshapes our emotions, and so on. And we keep testing that water with, new sort of appreciation for the emotions that we've experienced. And I'm not exactly sure where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought there.
So I had a thought while you were talking. We were talking before the show about what you do. You work with foster care kids as a caseworker. First of all, that is a really hard job. But second of all, with all of your background, kind of what you write, how much of that do you think that you use when you're working with the kids?
like my experiences and
Yeah,
like the writing and
your
everything.
experiences, kind of like your philosophy towards that. Yeah.
I would say it's definitely something that I think about when I'm interfacing with a lot of these kids because like we I'm not trying to get like sympathy or anything, but like when you say it's a hard field, it's you see a lot of kids under very tough circumstances. Um, they're in foster care for a reason, right? So it's not, oh, I got spanked a few times. It's uh, broken ribs, or you go down the line, it gets that bad and worse. So, if anything, I try to keep a very professional stature between what I do as an advocate and there's a little bit of bleed over with different interagency stuff that I'm able to kind of bring those things to the table, but it absolutely shapes how I view these kids because you have your deck of cards and I'm going to work my absolute hardest to try to positively influence how you think about them because you're not this deck. You're not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, however long it takes. Like this isn't where your story ends, and yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but it definitely shapes how I interact with them and how I view them. Yeah.
You talk about, especially in this piece, you talk about how you can sometimes get thrown into what I'm going to call triggers or memories of that time period for you. That has to happen all the time in your work, right? So do you have like a method you use to kind of help you cope with that, or is that a strength for you, or how does that work out?
I definitely utilize some coping mechanisms for sure. Yeah. A lot of it's almost, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but I'm at a point in my own healing journey, I guess we'll call it, where I have kind of a detachment. And you almost have to, I feel like in this field, like you have to toe a very fine line of emotional investment, but also certain things that you see are just going to put you there. Certain stories you hear are just going to put you there. So being able to take a break, hit the gym, go out in nature, write, I use those skills quite a bit. Yeah. So it definitely happens, but I find I'm able to kind of navigate them pretty well.
Is there because I'm guessing a lot of this comes down to recognizing emotions when they arise. Is there a method you use for sort of recognizing like when something has affected you? Because it's very easy to ignore, I think, and like suppressing emotions, we all know what that does.
Yeah, just throw it to the depths. Do it later. Compartmentalize. Yeah, it's almost weird because prior to all of this, like I spent about a decade in different first response civil service roles. So a different kind of trauma and a different ability to, whether positively or negatively, default to compartmentalizing things. So these days I'm kind of able to recognize when I'm in that mode, when I'm feeling perhaps more detached or more numb, or I have this tendency to be like, yeah, we're just gonna nope, and keep going. And as soon as I start doing that, I'm usually able to kind of catch myself and be like, okay, we gotta deal with this.
Yeah. It seems like self-awareness is a key skill in dealing with mental health.
Yeah, you got to have enough to where you're able to like work on shit, but you can't have too much because then you're just you're just like
an existential
narcissism dread. And existential dread, narcissism, ego, like all this. I know me. more well than, you know, it's like, all right. But yeah.
All right, so we're at the end of the show, so I just want to I want to see, what do you like, what is the big thing that you hope that people get out of your work, or what do you hope that they do with your work? Where do you hope it goes?
Kind of like we discussed a little bit. You asked me the question, you know, is this cathartic? Is this kind of like a therapy? I hope that people can find that here, you know, because with everything that I write about, the reason why I chose character to write about, and why I've wanted to write about the things that I do, is because they're things that I haven't mastered. Like I'm not on the other side of much of this. Now I might be a little bit further than some people, and if those some people read it and they get something from it, then that's the whole purpose. That's great. But a lot of it very much is like, I don't really understand this, but by the end of this essay, I hope I do. And these are things that I'm thinking about. And you know, character is, it's not in normal life, absent doing all the stuff that I do, which I don't even know if it is something as public. Well, I don't know if it really is displayed or not. But for the most part, dare I say, in like normal life, whatever that is, character is not this like public display often. It's, at least in the context of working on it, it's a very private thing. Most of it is what we do when no one's looking, whether that's, hey, I've got this new job and there's an office assistant over there, or hey, I have a badge and a gun and I don't have a body cam, or whatever it might be. The deeper recesses of substance abuse, or traumatic circumstances. Who are you right now? Nobody's looking. Who are you when you're interacting with your children? Who are you when you have the public eye on you? Because who you are when no one is looking is who you become when everyone is. And so, and I say all of this with an authority that I do not have, because again, I'm not above any of it. I am very much working on my character daily, because that's what I have to do as somebody who was addicted to a substance, as somebody who made a lot of the mistakes that I have made, suffered some of the moral injuries, whether that was self-inflicted or otherwise, that I have. It is a continual process. So to try to package it in a somewhat neat way, I want the reformed monsters, or the monsters seeking reform, to find me. And I want them to join me on this venture of, hey, we're going to work on our character. And it's not perfect. It's not easy, but it's necessary. And yeah, I just want to help dudes. So, and air all my garbage.
I think it's so important the way you approach this, because I think so many times we hear the story once it's over, or once the person feels like their story is concluded. And that was something that this piece even says, is that like, you haven't concluded your story. We're getting to experience like you recounting, like we get to experience you creating your identity as you're creating it. And I think there's more to be learned from that than people who've already decided their identity and are just retelling a story. I think that's something that, you know, like really attracts me to your work, is that it's happening in real time.
I have to completely agree. All right. With that, you are absolutely fantastic at what you do and everything you create. I highly encourage everyone to pop over to Nick's channel and definitely subscribe, definitely like, definitely read his pieces and experience this journey with him. It is fantastic. You can also catch the Seeker's Scoop with Dr. Morton at drmorton.substack.com and myself at dearfutureoverlords.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a fantastic show. Had a great time. Was super excited about this all week. Thank you, Nick, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Morton. Thank you to everybody who joined us live. We will see you. What day are we coming back, Dr. Morton?
I think the 28th.
The 28th, we have Mr. A joining us. Super excited about that. You don't want to miss that live. That will be a great time. Good night, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
again, Nick.